Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Investor Financing Podcast. Today's going to be an exciting show. We're going to dive deep in. We talk to a lot of multifamily syndicators, but we do not talk to people that actually design, build, and then run these multifamily properties. And I'm curious to find out the efficiencies this gentleman's putting into his buildings and why ground up. Well, probably you deal with less maintenance issues as one, and more efficient properties, and you're building them and the life cycle of the asset, plus it's an A-class building. So there's a lot of things I want to roll into this conversation, but please welcome Mike Kaeding. He is the CEO of Norhart. He designs, builds, and rents apartments. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
So Norhart, how did that name come about?
At the heart of it, you've got two aspects. You got Nor or Norwegian and strength, and then heart, which is that like softer, more compassionate side. And so it's a mixture of strength and compassion that we kind of liked it.
So I was listening to a previous podcast of yours, and your father actually started the business, and then you got involved, and it sounded like a few months in, he passed away unexpectedly. So first of all, sorry when I heard that on the podcast. So when you got into this business, you were just learning it. So you really essentially bootstrapped the company. Is that kind of how you started it? I mean, can you walk me back to that process? And now you have this company. Where were you at that time? Did you have one or two buildings, or did you have several buildings?
We had a few small buildings at the time. We're a pretty small enterprise. But yeah, my dad passed away, and basically overnight, I was running this business. And if I'm really honest, I didn't know what I was doing. But looking back, I think that was the magic, because we started to question everything. We started questioning, why is construction being done this way? Can we do it differently? And there was nobody to tell us no. And so that started this journey of experimenting and trying new things to find new ways to drive down the cost of constructing housing.
So your model right now is essentially you're doing it all. You're designing, you're finding locations, you're entitling the properties.
Yeah.
You're designing what differences in the designs are you implementing that might not be mainstream right now, that where you're seeing like efficiencies in energy uses and things like that? Can you kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah, I guess I can take a quick step back and look at our company as a whole, because at the end, what we're trying to do is drive down the cost of housing. And we're already achieving about a 20 to 30% reduction in cost. We think we can achieve a 50% reduction in cost over time. And when you look at other industries like manufacturing, they've improved productivity by 760% over the past 60 years. Agriculture has improved it by 1,500%. Do you have any guess what construction has done during that time period?
Probably like 9%.
Wow, you're the closest I've ever seen. 10%, essentially nothing. It's terrible, right? Why do we put up with this as a society? And so as we started looking at it and said, there's no reason we can't apply the innovations and techniques that these other groups have done into construction. And so the very first thing that we started doing was bringing all the work in-house. So we originally were more just a general contractor. We would sub out a bunch of different things. We bring all the work in-house. Now, the magic of that is, in part, people start working better together if you're in the same team. Imagine if a Toyota or any car company, they were producing cars like we built apartments. They would have a different company installing the windshield, a different company installing the door, a different company installing the wheel. And then, of course, the wheel company would be like, sorry, I got delayed on my last project. I won't be there for a week or two. Weather issues. I'm sorry. And then when they do get out there after your factory's been shut down for a couple of weeks, they get upset with you because they can only work on one car at a time. So they throw up their hands, they storm out, and they may be yelling and screaming on their way out. And that's what we live with in traditional construction. And if they were to do that in manufacturing, it would fall apart. So bringing everything under one roof was sort of the first step, and then allows us to do some really other cool techniques. But I'll pause there.
Okay, so that makes sense, right? Like you're now everything's in one wheelhouse, but we're so is that where the savings are coming from, or is it just, are you using different technologies in building, or is it just the fact that you're not outsourcing, so you're saving, right? I mean, I'm sure there's a big savings right there. If you're doing enough of these projects, more and more cost savings goes into this. Where else are you seeing the efficiencies? Or is
Yeah,
it just
there are dozens, if not hundreds of techniques. Oftentimes we say it's solving a lot of little problems. It's not like one magical big thing, but I'll give you the next one, which is once you bring everything in-house, now we can start applying the concept of an assembly line. Now, in an assembly line, products move past the workers. We can't do that here. Buildings are not going to slide down a conveyor belt. But what we can do is we can move the workers through the building. So we take the large building and we break it into smaller chunks. We call batches, which are roughly the size of a unit. And then every 5 hours, the team moves. So plumbers who are in one unit, 5 hours later, they move to the next unit. They move to the next unit. And they move to the next unit. And electricians right behind them moving down the line. And so we've got like 120 tasks that go into a building. We've broken it down into, but every 5 hours, people move that line down. And what that does for us is it condenses the space people work. We could take a 15-month project and make it 9 months. So that's another example of a technique.
So what was your background before you got into the business? Where did you go to school? What kind of education? You seem like you might have like an engineering or something background. I'm just curious.
Yeah, my degree is in computer science with a minor in mathematics and management, a near major in finance, and a near minor in accounting.
Okay, very good. I would say that, like, if I would see you on the street, I would say this guy looks smart. He's probably like some kind of engineer or in kind of computer sciences. So I was pretty accurate.
Yeah.
And so I find that most people in multifamily and like all the syndicators, the ones that seem to do really well have kind of like an engineering like a numbers background, right? And like they're very analytical, and I think that's what it takes in multifamily versus like you see the single family investors. They're more like they don't need those similar skills. So it's interesting to see the backgrounds of people. So what's what type of building? Like what's the avatar building? Is it 200 units, 300 units? What are you doing market rent? Or are these affordable units? I'm curious on that.
Yeah, so our building size, we're targeting around 350 units per building at the moment. And this is an interesting point to bring up. We're not affordable in the traditional sense. We offer market rate properties. They're actually some of the nicest in our state. And the goal is to solve America's housing affordability crisis. But how do you actually do that on a nationwide scale? Well, we are taking the profits we're earning in each building and moving that into building the system that builds apartments. Think about it like an apartment factory, right? And Elon Musk talks about this. To produce a car is hard. To produce the system or the factory that builds a car is 10 to 100 to 1,000 times harder. And I could not agree more. And so most of our energy and time is into building that system and that infrastructure. But then our goal, our dream is as we scale out over the next decade is to produce so many units to the marketplace that supply and demand factors hit. And now supply is there and prices come down. And that's how you actually solve it on a nationwide scale. You can't solve it. If I just gave discounted rents to renters today, great. That solves it for a few thousand renters, but it doesn't solve it nationwide.
That's amazing. That's like amazing. So you're building this system. Is the system then going to be licensed to other people, or this system you think is going to be kind of like the Amazon of multifamily construction?
It's probably going to be like the Amazon. I certainly have no issue licensing out to people. What you find is that it's not necessarily a written book of rules or a particular machine. It's like embedded into the minds of the people you have on your team, right? And because of that, it's hard to like just duplicate it over and over again. But as we grow and as we improve it, it certainly could be more duplicatable.
So you raise capital for building out these. Is the model that these are really like a lot of multifamily investors, like the last couple of years has been fantastic for them. Like everybody was a rocket scientist, home runs galore. Obviously the market's changed now. It's a lot different. But what's your, are you holding long term with your investors, or what's the plan with these?
Yeah, so we are holding long term, but here's an interesting point. We really don't have investors today, although we are opening that up, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Um, when we build buildings, because we're 20 to 30% less, oftentimes we can bring in a bank that provides more cash than we need to build a building. And because of that, each building that's done generates cash. So we don't need investors. We get cash right from the normal banking system, which is incredible. It has changed. The market's changed, right? So banks have become more conservative. As a result, we may be getting 75% loan to value. Banks today are more like 55 or 65% loan to value. And so now we are opening opportunities for investors to get involved. But yeah, we haven't traditionally needed that.
So you were just getting construction financing, and once the property was stabilized, it was worth a lot more money, refinance, get all the, if any, of your capital back out, and you didn't need investors. Wow, that's pretty amazing, because you're able to save 30 or 40% on building. And
Well, it's even better than that. We could get our capital out on like month 2.
Oh, because you were still in the line item construction. They're like, you can't do this cheap. You got to put the full construction budget when they
And
were.
so what we have, yeah, we have a conglomerate of companies, but we have all the subcontractors. And so we're very transparent with the bank, but our subcontractor companies get to earn a profit. And so we charge fair market rate to the bank or the construction statement, but we're capturing that money back very early during the process.
That's super smart, man. This is cool. This is really cool. You're opening up my mind to like the possibilities, and it is amazing. As like, it's almost like when that person, I can't think of his name, he beat the 4-minute mile, right? And nobody thought it was ever going to be possible.
Yeah.
All this is like possible, right? Like, and you're cracking, this is your niche. You're basically going to create the most efficient build design firm that can build multifamily, like, you know, eventually probably at 50% of, or 40% of what everybody else can do, because you're niching down each little component within the build, the cost of materials, what materials, the labor, the whole assembly line. And that's essentially the niche you've created, that I don't know anybody else that's doing that. So that's pretty fantastic.
You think of like Walmart or Amazon compared to the small retailers of 30 years ago, right? Like Amazon and Walmart drove down the costs of how to provide you products at a very quick, timely fashion. No one's really done that in a meaningful way in construction. And there's a lot of reasons why, but that's what we're trying to execute on. And
then what are you doing for like efficiencies within the building? Are you like, what so far, I guess, have you seen, like, is solar, are you doing solar? What efficiencies can you bring in these buildings, which lower like electricity and utility costs and so forth? And is that like an area of focus as well?
Yeah, it is. So we are bringing solar into our buildings, high efficiency HVAC equipment, very thoughtful on the exterior wall designs and things for that envelope. But I think kind of at a deeper level, what we think about it is ultimately the people we have here. And I can talk more about that in a bit, but just specifically on the design and engineering, we've got a whole design and engineering team. And the reason, again, we're doing that is because they are designing new ways to build these buildings. And it's nothing big. There's no like one magical wand. It's a lot of little things in how the building is constructed, the system in which we build buildings, and then also the quality of the building when it's done. We, for example, we switched recently over to steel, and they are doing these joists. And it turns out, because of the way we're doing things, there's a certain dimension that is pretty much the same wherever we go. And they're doing like a deep dive dissertation on the 30-foot long joist. And they're just absolutely maximizing this joist to be like perfect for the scenario. But you can do that, and you can do it in manufacturing as well. But we're doing that within construction right now to maximize how we're using those resources.
And I'm sure sometimes you have to educate like the planning and building department, because they're like, well, we've never seen this before.
Yeah, but the caliber of team is so incredibly high. Honestly, some of these engineers are probably, I'm not exaggerating, I think they really are best in the country at what they're doing. And it's just fun. Like, I just stand back and watch them. It's incredible the work they're doing to redesign how things are thought of.
When did Norhart start? How long ago was this?
My parents started it in the early 90s, and then I really took over early 2010s.
Okay. And so every building you build now, I'm sure you have KPIs that you measure. And so that's probably a good indicator. Is there like a common, like each build, are you trying to like get 2 or 3% more efficient? Is there kind of a KPI metrics that you're looking at
Yeah,
utilizing?
one of our big ones that we measure internally is cost to value. This is the cost of a building divided by its value when it's complete. It's sort of like loan to value, but it's a cost to value. Um, and so we're watching that one all the time. It hovers for us around 70 to 75%. Although we're seeing that come down each project that we do. The second one we look at substantially is just because it's a challenge for us right now is percent batch complete. So once someone's done with their batch, are they 100% done? And if they're not 100% done, if they have to go back to that batch, that unit for any reason, that's marked as fail. And then we're trying to get that as close to 100% as we can. And then there's a supply chain that goes into that as well.
And what do you have like in your pipeline right now for like new builds? Is it like 3 or 4 buildings going on at once where you're in some sort of planning, or is it more than that?
Yeah. So we have, it's like a continuous train. So some of our team is just finishing up one building right now. There's another building that the other part of the construction crew is starting. There is one that's going through city council approval right now. Then we have we have a couple going through city council approval. And then we have a couple that they're just like discussing and negotiating land prices.
And what is your existing portfolio? Do you have like 10 or 15 different apartments?
Yeah, it's maybe getting close to 24, something like that.
So a couple thousand units, like 2,000 units under management?
Now, so we were about 1,000 units under management, but we're building at about 500 units a year. It's
Okay.
kind of crazy, but every year that passes, it's always that we're building a lot compared to our size because we've been more or less doubling in size every year.
So are you vertically integrated as far as property management, or is that outsourced?
No, that's all internal as well. Yeah,
And are you building the same kind? Are you spending time on the efficiencies in property management as well, or not as?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, well, again, I think it really goes back to the caliber of people that you have. We fight to find the best people in the world. That's literally the bar, best in the world. We'll fly people in from other states to come work, and then we fly them home every weekend. For property management, again, it's going to sound exaggerated, but I honestly don't think it is. I think we probably have the best property management person in our state working for us. It's just incredible the work that she's doing. It's even little things like it's just a lot of little things. So we actually have local team, but we also have a remote leasing team. And so these are people from other countries. We have a fairly large international staff that actually supplement and actually help with the leasing team. And so that's one of the examples of efficiencies they've engaged in.
You're listening to the Investor Financing Podcast. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, this is Beau, host of the Investor Financing Podcast. I appreciate you checking out our channel. On this podcast, we talk about real estate, investing, financing, business lending, and acquiring and expanding your business. I'm sure you will find some videos here that will help you build your business empire. There's a lot to see. Take your time and make sure you comment, like, and subscribe. Thanks again.
So right now, these projects are all mostly in Minnesota, although you said you had a manufacturing facility in Mexico.
Yeah, we're working on one in Mexico. We have one in Wisconsin, and we are actively working to expand our apartments into Texas right now. We've got some land sites that we're under negotiation.
Why did you decide on Texas? Just out of curiosity.
Because it's a fast growing area. It's part of the Sun Belt, right? That's going well. But the bigger reason is because it's a large amount of population in a fairly small area, all within about a 3-hour drive of each other. And that gives us room to accelerate our growth without having to expand geographically at massive distances.
That makes sense. So is that like in the what do they call it? The triangle between Dallas, San Antonio, and I mean, when I heard the
Yeah.
stats about how many big companies are in there, I mean, it's pretty eye-opening why a lot of people are investing there.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And so what's the best way that you found that you're identifying parcels? Do you have an acquisition team in-house and they're contacting brokers, direct to sellers kind of thing?
Yeah, so we do have an acquisition team in house. We are sort of in the transition phase where traditionally it's been more like get, look at the listings that are available online, work with brokers and stuff like that. But now we're starting to be more proactive and actually contacting landowners directly, building on our own database of people that may be willing to sell eventually. And we're looking to build up a bit of an inventory of land as well.
Yeah. And so your plan is to hold these long term and just grow and grow and um, keep on refining your process, it sounds like. And it sounds like that's really where you can excel. I mean, if you can, so I guess when you go all in, when you're stabilized, what kind of equity cushion are you looking for? When you're, seeing if this project's going to pencil out for you. What does that like equate to?
Oh, our equity cushion right now, like I said, we wrote 20 to 30% less than other developers. So the equity cushion then is more than that. It's maybe 25 to 35%. And that's on like during construction. A lot of times as multifamily developers have seen over the past few years, although I don't think it's going to hold going forward, you see another bump after it's complete and stabilized, right? So if you had on that bump, we probably been more at like 35 to 40. I mean, some of our projects we've tripled from cost to value to tripled or quadrupled in the last few years just because of the market.
Right. And so now you got to be a little bit more conservative because the market's changed.
Yeah.
But so you're going to go in and what's the kind of all-in project cost that you deal with building these 350 units? Is that like a 25 million type of all-in cost for 350 units?
It depends on the quality of project. So if we're talking more suburban, nice high-end multifamily still, then yes. If we're talking like, 7, 8 stories, penthouse suites, restaurant, coffee shop, that sort of thing, then it is higher than that.
And then, but so when you start raising capital, hypothetically, this is all hypothetical, people, but
Yeah.
But if you're like, this sounds attractive for an investor. Like if I go in and day one, this team's building something with $6 million of equity or whatever, day one, that's pretty phenomenal, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think you'll probably have a fairly easy
Yeah.
time because you have a track record of doing this, and it's like, and people could participate in, being an investor in something that, hey, we're going to build it for 25 million. It's going to, when it's stabilized, it's 38 million or whatever that number is, right? Like to me, if I was a limited partner, that makes a lot of sense versus buying like a dilapidated Class C multifamily and then, putting lipstick on a pig, right? This is completely different. We're doing ground up. The lifespan of this product is going to be far superior.
Mhm.
There's going to be less CapEx, less maintenance, less overall costs.
Yeah, so we get investors very regularly interested in that for that very reason, because the profit margins are so large. But you have to go back to like, why are we doing what we're doing? We're doing it to solve America's housing affordability crisis. And so if we structure a deal in such a way that investors get a tremendous outsized return, I'm not using that capital then to invest in the system of building. And so because of that, our first offering to the market, which is not actually an offering yet, although it is going through SEC approval right now, we're using a Reg A and we're going more toward retail investors rather than your typical accredited investors, and offering a product where they can put money in and earn a really high rate of return, much higher than the banks, and then they can pull that money out as they so choose, or they can lock it up for 6, 9, 12, or 24 months. And so that product will probably be fully announced by the time this podcast goes live.
No, I don't know. That's pretty cool. I like that. So will you have like a platform where they could just easily invest? And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I've been investing in this bridge lending company, and they just have a really easy. They do short term loans to fix and
Mhm.
flippers, and I like it because I can take like 50 of their loans, and I could just put in a little bit in each, which was cool for me. But what I really liked about it, how easy it was for me to put money in it, in and out.
Exactly. That's what we're trying to do is this platform makes it really easy. We are not a bank. We are not FDIC insured, but it feels a little bit like a bank
Yeah.
because you can put money in, you can lock it up for a certain term, earn a higher rate of return if you lock it, and then just pull it back out when you want. You know what your rate of return is going to be, and you know what that term is going to look like.
What is there any anticipation on minimums and like what the minimum, for an investor, like could they put in 10 grand, or does that have to be 50 or 100, or what would that look like?
No, this is one thing that was important to me is that we made it no minimum. And so the way we do that is we have to go through the Reg A. So it's a more advanced scrutiny through the SEC. We have to be audited. And there's hundreds of pages of wonderful legal docs for people to read, which is, I think is actually kind of interesting. But yeah, there's no minimum. And the reason we're looking at that this way is so many people can't get involved in real estate, right? And because of all those rules. And so we're looking at and saying, can we eliminate the bank, right? Can we allow everyday people to invest directly and kind of replace the bank? And so that's what we're doing. And then we're not only giving you the rate of return you would earn at a bank, but you're getting the bank's profits on top of that. So it becomes kind of a compelling proposition to many.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more. I think it's important when I look at what's happening with society, and then you also see like there's a lot of articles about the hedge funds coming back in and buying single families, which were really like, hey, multifamilies for investors, single families are for people who want to own a house, right? And I feel bad for the average American that they're not going to be able to afford to buy a single family house, right? Like,
Yeah.
or they can't even afford to rent them an apartment, right? So what you're really doing is you're solving a big problem, which is like, listen, we're going to have we're going to create efficiencies in the multifamily space where eventually that will drive down, total rents, because we're able to build products more efficiently, which basically we can have more units. We won't have shortages, which will, balance out what the cost of rents are going to be. Because everybody's trying to drive, these traditional syndicators and multifamily investors, like their goal is to just squeeze every penny out of it, right?
Yeah.
Versus like you're really trying to solve a problem. And I know sometimes my mind always goes to like making money, but you're, obviously you're a business and you got to make money, but you're trying to solve a problem. I think that's where I feel your passion really is, versus like, hey, I'm doing this to become like the biggest billionaire ever, which is cool that you have a passion for something that other than just, hey, I want to make the most money I can, because that's not even the way you set this up. That's not even the way it is. So
Yeah,
it's
and I think
pretty
that's such a
awesome.
great point. My dad died young, and I often think about how short life really is, right? We only live 5,000 weeks or so on this earth. So every morning I wake up and I think, how do I want to spend the minutes that I have here on this earth? And I know I'm not bashing people. There are some people that are very focused on profits, and I get that. It's respectful. It moves the economy forward. But like, I could care less, right? I could care less if in my coffin they're shoveling $100 bills on it, right? It just does not matter. What matters to me is what kind of meaningful impact we can have here on this earth. And for us, what I think we can have is that solving America's housing affordability crisis. And it's even deeper than that, because if you look at the next decade or two or three, the changing demographics in the United States are going to make things tough on all of us. You have more retired people, less working people, and therefore less, assets and capital and money for all of us to spread out. But if we can take what's typically 30% of somebody's budget and drop that down to 15%, now you can have still great housing at a lower cost point, and there's more wealth and benefit that can go to us all. And so it's those sorts of problems that I'm excited about. We have to be mindful of the money. Don't get me wrong there, but that just doesn't motivate me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I own some cheap properties in different states, and I don't know. I just got into like buying properties in the Midwest, and I was like, you're in the beginning. I was like, this is crazy. I can buy these houses for like literally $30,000, and like it's just amazing, like versus I live on the West Coast, right? I used to live in
Mm,
California. I live in Las Vegas now. In California, where I lived in the Bay Area, and just so expensive. Even when I moved, the house I was going to buy in California was like a 1.5. I bought the same house a couple of years ago here for 380,000. And it just kind of
wow.
blew my mind, just the differences, right? And then I can go to Indiana. I remember I bought a house in South Bend, Indiana for $9,600. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like, I mean, this was 2016 or something, but I'm like, this is crazy. I could just go fix it up and rent it to somebody that can afford to rent it. And then I started buying fourplexes and things, and like, they're even in like the workers of the world that are working at like the Walmarts and stuff, they don't make too much money. They need a place to live, and there's a huge crisis there. I mean, I have these little apartments that I rent out for $500 or $600 a month, and I mean, like, I feel like I'm solving a little bit of a problem
Yeah.
for them. I mean, the problem from an investor standpoint, it's just not scalable for me. That I
Yeah.
don't like love it, but I also feel like, hey, this is kind of solving a problem for people. But what you're doing is on a huge scale, where I can really see that the impact that this is going to have, because we know there's a tremendous shortage of housing, and even during recessions, people still need a place to live, and it's probably going to be a. So I guess your take on the market right now. Do you think it's going to get? I mean, people always need a place to live, but what's your take on the recession now, and kind of going forward? And then what opportunities are you looking for? It seems like now there'll be more land to negotiate on, because it's not going to sell like it used to, and not as many people are going to be building because they're scared. How are you
Mm.
going to take advantage of that?
For us, one thing that's really beneficial is the fact our costs are so much lower. We're a little bit immune to the market, not entirely, but a little bit immune to the market because, yeah, maybe our profit margins go from, 40% down to 20%. For other people that like wiped them out or they can't keep building, we can. So that's one beneficial item. The I really start to think about things more on the order of like a decade or two or three. And when you think that far out, you look at examples like Japan. In Japan, because of the demographics where we're headed, housing there has looked more like a car purchase, where it actually depreciates in value over time. You can buy houses there really inexpensively. You can buy houses expensively. It's like a new car versus an old car. I think that is where that world is heading. If we can provide enough housing to the market, it becomes a pretty inexpensive thing for people, and people have a variety of choices.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, this has been an amazing interview. I'm actually going to be investing some money as soon as you guys roll out. So please keep me posted. I like the platform, what you're doing, and I like that you can lock your money up for 12, 24 months, it sounds like. So uh, you're going to get a higher return than putting it into most things like that most people put their idle money into. So you won't get you won't get benefits though, like you won't get a K1 this way, or do you know how that will work mechanism wise? If you did cost segregation and stuff, would that apply to somebody?
And you're right. You don't get any of that. You get it's interest income, basically.
So,
It's
so
actually a
you,
debt
okay,
product.
so it's going to be an interest, just like I'm investing in this other company I was telling you about.
Yep.
I'm going to get
Exactly.
a 1098I or whatever that is.
Mhm.
Perfect. Well,
Yeah.
where can people find out more about you? I know you have a podcast too, if you want to
Yeah. So
let
you
us.
can learn more about us by visiting norhart.com. That's NORHART.com. And on there, you can click on invest to learn more about our investment opportunities. And we are launching a podcast. The idea of the podcast, it's called Becoming a Unicorn. It's about the journey of small companies growing to billion-dollar enterprises and what it took to get there, both the good, the bad, and the ugly. We kind of want to share and open it all up.
All right, that's pretty cool. I listen. I love podcasts like that. I like. What's your favorite podcast or two that you listen to now?
Oh man, I'm really into books right now, so I can give you a few of them. But Guy Raz, I love his podcast. That's probably one of the ones I'm listening to most.
And what's that about?
Um, there are, it's like just interesting things going on in the world. So it's just really kind of cool, interesting people changing the world in their little niche. And so it might be something really obscure, or it might be something groundbreaking, but it's just cool, interesting people changing the world in their own way.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I like Alex Hermosi. He's pretty interesting. I don't know if you've seen him. He's got a pretty good mind. He started in the gym industry, and then now he has a company called acquisitions.com, and he helps like companies that are generating $3+ million become $100 million companies. He'd be a great guest to have on your podcast.
Oh,
you can get that guy. He's
cool.
really, really good. And he's got a huge following too. So that'd be a total score to get that guy on your podcast.
Awesome. I love it. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. Well, very good. Thank you so much. This was a really awesome episode. I felt like I love when I interview somebody and I can feel their compassion and, they're sincere about what they're doing. And I can definitely feel that about you. So really appreciate your time. And thanks everybody for watching. Yeah. Hey guys, Beau Eckstein here. If you enjoyed what you saw, please subscribe to this channel. We talk all things financing. I've been in the lending industry for over 20 years, and I'm happy to answer your questions and provide great content.